Hi there, Release Fight here, so I'm going to talk you through how I managed to beat Sephiroth, the final boss fight here in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Hopefully the tips are going to help you out. If they do, drop me a like below. But essentially, this guy seems a lot more difficult than he actually is, and if you've got the right strategy, then you should be able to take him down relatively easily. Obviously, it's the final boss, so it's not going to be an absolute breeze, but you can see I'm just building up my ATB and then using Punisher modes to block and then counterattack. And that gives me a really good opportunity to then hit him up with a focus thrust, which does a huge amount of impact to his stagger bar. And if you keep up the pressure with Punisher mode and focus thrust, then you should be able to build up the first stagger and go through to the second phase of the fight using the same process. Now you can see there, while he was staggered, I used Thundaga on Sephiroth, but it didn't do a great deal of damage, so don't try that yourself. Definitely keep on hitting him up with abilities and then go back to the same process. When you block in Punisher mode, get in your counter attack and then hit up the focus thrust to keep building up his stagger bar to eventually move towards that second stagger. And it doesn't take long before you get through to the phase where Tifa joins you in the fight and you've got more opportunities to switch between the two to get in your hits. Now I'd got Tifa pretty well set up as one of the healing members of my party, so I used her fairly quickly to get some cures on Cloud, and then I just got back to the process of counterattack and focus thrust to keep on moving and cycling through the staggers. And at this stage, obviously, you've got two people doing the damage and you can take his health bar down quite a lot. I just stayed in Punisher mode and unleashed everything that I could, and I got him fairly close to halfway through. Now, the whole Punisher mode block stagger system only works if you're also rolling out of the way of any magic damage that he does, or using abilities to interrupt him when he's doing magic damage. So make sure you're ready with the rolls, but as soon as you do get through to the stagger, just lay in as much damage as you can and get back to the same process of switching between the two to go either side of him and then using Cloud to do the majority of the damage. Tifa also had barrier equipped, so I used that on Cloud just to give him more opportunities to get in close, do some big hits, and track ever closer to the next stagger. So you can see I'm literally just going toe to toe with him, knowing that I've got mana wall in place to keep me fairly safe. But you can see at this stage you can't just block and counter all of Sephiroth's sword-based attacks because they're landing now. So at this stage, it was a case of using both Tifa and Cloud to try to team up the damage and get it through to the next stagger, which I managed to do, but it's a short stagger and it didn't take long to go through to the next phase of the battle, and Aerith joins you in the fight, and you can see I've got Aerith set up with a hell of a lot of MP, so I could use her to do a huge amount of damage with magic, as you'll see a little bit later on. But as soon as you see Sephiroth doing an infusion move, he'll kind of give you enough time to get in a little bit of cures if you need one. I needed a little bit of extra health for Cloud at this stage, which definitely helped me beat Sephiroth. And then you can see again the block move doesn't work anymore. Instead, what you need to do is cycle through your parties to get in the damage. Sephiroth normally attacks front onwards and only turns eventually to the player that you're controlling. So it does give you an opportunity to switch around between the three to be able to get in your damage. But you should be able to see how little impact anything is having on Sephiroth's stagger bar. It just doesn't seem to go up no matter what I used, even if I'm using lots of focus. However, it seems to change later on in the fight once you get in below a certain amount of damage. So at the moment I was just spending a lot of time switching around between them all, and then I noticed that when I changed into Punisher mode and did a faraway hit, that brought him down to the ground, and suddenly everything changed, and I think it's when he gets below 50% damage, you can then start getting more impact to his stagger bar, and you can see I'm up to 50% now, pretty much out of nowhere, and then it's just a case of cycle, rinse, repeating in that process, switching between the three, and then heading back into Cloud to get in some more Punisher mode attacks, using abilities and summons that you have along the way, and that should be enough to be able to get you a little step closer to getting that full stagger. Now in terms of the summons itself, I brought out Shiva, and she seemed to do quite good damage and actually helped me out quite a lot in the fight, as she pretty much always does. But as soon as he started to do Frostbite, I had to switch strategies and go after the huge chunks of ice that he had, and then try to get in the attacks on Sephiroth himself. Luckily, Shiva did a huge chunk of damage and allowed me to get closer to the stagger, and as soon as I got the full stagger on him, I then unleashed Cloud's Ascension Limit Breaker and then switched out to everybody else to get in as much damage while he was staggered. And this is where you need to just lay in with everything that you can, because this is how you'll close out the fight a lot quicker. And if you get in enough damage, then that should see you through to the final phase of the final boss fight here in Final Fantasy VII Remake, which sees Sephiroth getting into a bit of a dark state and flying with a single wing, as you'll see in a little second. And he's got like Shadow Flare and lots of attacks. Anytime you see these Shadow Flares coming towards you, essentially you just need to skip out of the way, either roll or do Aerith's little skip out of the way to stay away from them, and then just keep piling on the pressure. You can see that Shiva is still doing a good amount of damage in the distance, while Aerith is trying to get out of the way of the Shadow Flares. But at this stage, I just wanted to get in a little bit of health to make sure I got through this little fight. So I just gave Cloud a little boost of regen just to get him a little bit closer. However, Shiva jumped in out of nowhere, unleashed her final move, dropped a huge amount of damage, I think it was like 4,000, and finished off Sephiroth out of nowhere. And that is how I managed to beat Sephiroth here in Final Fantasy VII Remake to complete the final boss fight in the main story. Hopefully the tips help you out. If they do, drop me a like below. You can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, with the links on the left hand side, and check out the rest of my guide for Final Fantasy VII Remake with the links on the right hand side. Leave any comments, let me know how you get on against Sephiroth, and I will catch you next time.